Hey everybody, so this is my first crack at doing a slideshow recording, so we're going to see how this goes. Uh, Start off just a couple housekeeping items. So I sent you all an email kind of outlining what we were going to be doing going forward. And then, in addition to that, I sent out the examination number 2 for you guys to complete and return back to me. I went ahead and set the due date for that as the end of the day, Tuesday, to give you guys some time, both to kind of go through and deal with this different format, but then also just in case there was any technology issues between now and then. So uh, feel free to give me a call, or the other great way to get a hold of me is via my work email, which, as you recall, it's in your syllabus. It's swan at brparc.com. So I think that my picture is going to show up in your lower right hand corner. At least it is on where I'm recording this, so that you'll hear my voice and hopefully get to see me as well. Not that you want to look at me, but um, at least there's some information there. Hopefully this works. So we're just going to go through the slides for this segment. If you remember, where we left off last time was we talked about architectural fees, different ways architects can structure their fees, risk management, managing and avoiding disputes. And that capped off what we were talking about in terms of for your examination. Um, this last part of the semester is really focused on the project. So we started off with the profession, and then we started talking about the practice of architecture, and now this is really diving into the project. So now that you've done all these things, you've set up your firm, you know how to manage it financially, you've got your insurance, you know how to manage risk, all of those sorts of things. Now we're going to dive into, all right, what are some key things to know about executing projects and going forward. So really where this starts and what we're going to be talking about in these lectures for this class is talking about um, uh, the construction documentation, um, construction contract administration, and bidding and negotiation. So really trying to look at, okay, once you get a project, what are, from a high level, the phases of the project. Now, if you remember, I did give you guys a 11 by 17 handout that had all of the design phases and the requirements per the B101 contract, as well as what you typically see the architect provide in their drawings in each of those phases. I uploaded a PDF to the share file for all of you to have of that for the design phases, and I recommend that you go ahead and look at that again and just make sure you're familiar with that. So this first part we're going to talk about is construction documentation. So really getting a handle on, what all encompasses construction documents. So first I want to start off by going through the organization and content of those construction documents. So the part that you're most familiar with, of course, is drawings, right? You do drawings to describe, what it is that you want to be built. But in addition to that, you will also prepare specifications. Those specifications further define the materials and how those materials get installed, uh, and who they are procured from, and those are divided into 49 divisions. And so we'll dive into more into specifications later in the semester, but you'll prepare these drawings and specifications that go together. In addition to the specifications, you will also prepare bidding requirements, contract forms, and contract conditions. All right. So the bidding requirements include an invitation to bid, instructions to bidders, information available to bidders, bid forms and their attachments, and bid security forms. So let's dive in a little bit deeper to each of those items. So an invitation for bid is typically what you would see on anything that is a publicly bid project. So anything that's like for a government entity, or a school district, or some sort of fiduciary that has a government or public funding side. And what this is because those are typically open bids, which means any contractor can bid on the project. What you can do is you send out an invitation to bid. And so a lot of times those are published in the newspaper or some other media that says, hey, we have this project, you can pick up plans or obtain plans here, and there's going to be a pre-bid meeting this date at this time at this location, and bids will be due at this date and time and location. And so you can do that on smaller projects too, or private projects. If you're inviting, say, 3 contractors to bid and outline those, although a lot of times you'll see architects just if it's a invited bid scenario where it's not publicly open, you'll see them typically include that in an email or something like that. Then there is the instructions to bidders. So there's an actual AIA contract form that's instructions to bidders, and that outlines what the bidder's responsibility is during bidding in terms of how they look at the contract documents, what their responsibilities are in coordinating and investigating a project site, looking at geotechnical reports, kind of the rules in which they have to bid. Then you'll see a lot of times there's what's called a supplementary instructions to bidders. And so that's something that you as the architect would prepare that modifies that AIA document that says, hey, here are some other things that I want you to consider, or here are some things that are different, omit this paragraph and put this paragraph in, and that kind of stuff. Then there's information that's available to bidders. So that will be stuff like a geotechnical report, so that they know generally what the subsurface conditions are. It may be, if you're doing an addition or renovation to an existing building, how they can obtain the project site, if there was a program or project budget that the owner wants distributed, any information that you might have that may be pertinent to a bidder in providing them the clearest picture of what it is that their responsibility is and the information that they may want to know. Next are bid forms and bid attachments. So you will typically prepare a bid form in which the contractor will fill out, that they're going to construct it for this amount of money and this many calendar days, and I'm going to have these unit prices, and I'm going to have these allowances, all those sorts of things. And so that is kind of the forms that actually get submitted as the bid. And then in addition to that are bid security forms. And so the bid security forms are things like the performance bond and the material labors bond, all the things that secure their project. In particular, in the bidding requirements is a bid security. So what a bid security is when the contractor submits their bid, they will say they're going to construct it for, say, $1 million, right? And in order to secure that bid for the owner, usually there is an amount that they have to submit, or a bond that says, yes, I stand behind my bid and I agreed to it. Another way to do that is with a check. And so you may say, well, we have to have a check for a certain amount to secure the bid. And what that does is that gives the owner the confidence that it is a legitimate bid, not just a bid that somebody threw out there and has no relevance. So when we look at the contract forms, it's really important that they know what sort of agreement that you're expecting them to enter into. And so you will include, hey, the actual contract that says, hey, we expect you to execute this agreement if you're the successful bidder. That way, the contractor knows what they're going to be held to in terms of a contract. And then you have a performance bond and payment bond. And so those are things where you would say where they require the contractor to submit a bond to faithfully complete the project as they said. And those in these forms, you're telling them what you expect them to do if they are selected. If the contractor is not selected, they don't secure a performance or payment bond. This is only for the successful contractor. But there's a cost for that. I mean, the bonds are essentially insurance, right? And so there's a cost to secure that, and that cost gets added into the project cost that the contractor uses to construct the project. And then contract conditions, you've got the general conditions and the supplemental general conditions. And we'll talk more about that later in the semester, but the general conditions is again, much like the instructions to bidders, is an AIA form, pretty standard that outlines the rules. This is the A201. So this is the rules that govern both the owner architect agreement and the owner contractor agreement. And it basically defines, all right, you've got these two contracts. Here are the rules that we're all going to play by. And then you can do a supplementary general conditions that basically defines or edits those general conditions that are in that contract. So you may further define, say, insurance requirements or retainage or, contract what's the word I'm looking for? Liquidated damages. If should the contractor go past the amount of time they owe the owner, $500 a day or whatever for every day that they go over. So that's where you would define those sorts of things as in the supplementary general conditions. So when you look at the bidding requirements and the contract forms and the contract conditions together with the specifications, that is what is called a project manual. All right. And so after a lot of times, and it's an 8.5 by 11 bound book, right, that you have that supplements your drawings. What's interesting is that people just in the industry just usually call it the specs, right? What's interesting is that the specifications are actually different than the bidding requirements, contract forms, and contract conditions. Those are Division 0 specifications. And together, the Division 0 plus Divisions 1 through 49 together, when you put them together, make the project manual. So actually, the bound book you prepare is project manual. Then, after you've issued the drawings, you will get questions during bidding, right? And those questions may require you to either clarify or modify your contract documents in order to secure the best bids. And so to do that, or there may be something you forgot to add or something you need to come back in and detail, do an extra detail or whatever. Those are things that you would issue as an addendum, and together plural is addenda. And so these addenda are issued after you've issued the drawings, but before there is a contract for construction in place. So you're amending those drawings up until the point that the contract with the contractor is executed. And together, when you have all the project manual, the drawings, and the addenda together, those make up the bidding documents. So all of those together should formulate the requirements necessary for the contractor to give a price for the project. And that is what the bid should be based on, is all of those items together. What's interesting is the construction documents, right, are really just the specifications, drawings, and addenda. Once the contract is executed, the Division 0 portion of the project manual really doesn't have any bearing on the construction per se, but is really more contractual agreement sort of information. And so all of that should be in place by that time. Now, you may have to refer back to some of those things, particularly the general conditions and supplementary general conditions, as you administrate the contract, but they are not actual construction documents. Then, after you've signed a contract, you've got the construction documents, it may be necessary to modify those drawings and specifications in order to get the project built. It may be that there's an error or omission on your part, and so you've got to modify something. It may be that the contractor has requested additional clarification or a dimension or something like that, and or it could be, you're working on an existing facility, and once they've done some of the selective demolition, you get in there and you realize, oh man, we've got unforeseen condition, and so we've got to change our drawings to accommodate that. And so you would issue a contract modification document, and we'll go through what those are here in a little bit. And so together, whenever you have the contract forms, the contract conditions, specifications, the drawings, the addenda, and the contract modification documents, those are called the contract documents. So a lot of times when it's under construction, people call it, oh, I'm doing construction administration. Well, that's true. You are administrating, well, you're not really administrating construction. You're administrating a contract for construction. Excuse me, and that contract for construction includes all of those items. So what I really want you to get from this slide is that there's all these pieces that we as the architect assemble and put together, but when you put it all together, they have different terms and are grouped differently depending on what stage you're at of the project and what you're really requiring. And so this is a really good diagram for you to keep going forward, just so you know what all these things come up to be. So legal and contractual information, bidding requirements, contractual forms. So in the AIA document B101, the architect's responsibility is to assist the owner in developing and preparation of one, bidding and procurement information that describes the time, place, conditions of bidding proposal forms, the form of agreement between the owner and the contractor, and 3, the conditions for the contract for construction, or the supplementary conditions. The owner's responsibility is to furnish all necessary legal, accounting, and insurance services to accomplish the project. Depending on, you may have an experienced client and they may have their own general conditions or their own supplementary general conditions, or their own procurement setup. But a lot of times you're working with clients that don't. The building you're designing for them may be the only building that they ever build. And so it may take some leadership and some time on your part to educate the client and go through some of these things that relate to the contracts, not necessarily the architecture. So when it comes to the procedural and administrative information, or the front end specs, right, the Division 0 specs, typically the general conditions of the contract, division rules, and it'll cover stuff like standard office procedures, required format for shop drawings, number of sets of submittals, which really most of the time we get electronic submittals these days, and procedures for substantial completion, procedures required by owners, such as forms of payment requests and lien waivers, and things that govern a specific project, such as codes, record documents, temporary facilities, laboratory methods, those sorts of things. And so just as a quick overview of what those Division 1 specifications are, is you've got all these different sections that go through kind of how they have to administrate the project. And I think what I'd like for you to take away from this is that it really drills down into all of the administrative duties that you're really asking the general contractor um, to do during construction, which which candidly is a lot. You're asking them to do, all the project management coordination, the construction progress documentation, photo documentation, and you can tailor this by project, by the way. It's not like you have to have all of these things in for every project, but typically, on larger projects, this is what you would see. Um, so part one of the specifications sections in divisions 2 through 48. So just to kind of back up, specifications are typically in three parts. There we are, three parts. So the first part is general information, right? And so that's what we're going to talk about here. The part two is products, the exact products that you expect to see. And then part three is the execution, which is how those materials are installed in relationship to other materials, and all sorts of other requirements as part of the installation, and then also specific warranty documents if you have those. So part one, in your specifications, typically it'll have definitions, delivery, storage, and handling of the materials, any relationship to allowance, unit prices, or alternates, the site condition requirements, what it has to be before they install that product, any submittal requirements, what do you expect to see from the contractor in terms of submittals, any warranty requirements on those materials, quality assurance requirements, maintenance requirements, and those sorts of things. So architectural and construction information. So we talked about drawings and specifications, and a way to kind of keep those straight is that drawings really go into where the material goes, how much of it there is, and what generally that material is, and in what configuration, right? The specifications talk about who provides those materials, what specifically that material is, when it gets installed, and how. So that's a good way to kind of think about how those two things really work together, the drawings and the specs. Now, this is an example of drawing sequence of Formex. What I want you to take away from this is that, look, you've got to organize your drawings, right? And every firm does it a different way. But typically you'll have like general information, life safety plans, and then you'll have floor plans and enlarged floor plans. And then typically you'll move into exterior elevations and building sections, wall sections. Roof plans sometimes come after wall sections. Sometimes they're included, along with the floor plans because it's a plan view. And then typically you'll have interior elevations, reflected ceiling plans. Sometimes they'll be, closer to the floor plans, or sometimes they're later in the drawings because they come later in the construction process as well. And then likewise, you'll have some floor finish plans as well. It really varies by project to project and firm by firm, but just know that there's some sort of structure to the drawings. Some other elements you might include are schedules, like door schedules, those sorts of things. Symbols and abbreviations, what are your abbreviations or symbols that you use? General notes and keynotes in your drawings. On your drawings, you'll have a drawing title block that you are required to have, usually by state statute. On all of your drawings, typically you've got a project title, what is the project, the address, and the owner. There will be a title, sheet title, and a number, A1.1 or whatever it is. Notation of who drew and checked the drawing, the date it was issued, any revisions to that drawing and the date of issuance, or that sheet and the date of issuance. The design professional of record and their license number, so who's sealing it, right? And typically most jurisdictions require that you include their full name and license number as well, in addition to their seal and signature and date. The certificate of authority. If you're practicing in a state that requires a corporation to have a certificate of authority to conduct business in that state, the Secretary of State for that state will issue a certificate of authority for a fee for you to be able to practice as an architect, engineer, landscape architect, whatever in that state. And then any copyright information. Typical sheet sizes. I've done 11 by 17 sets of drawings for tiny little projects, but you don't do that very often. Most of the time you're going to have 24 by 36 or 30 by 42s, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Next slide is about specification of organization. So each of these divisions, right? We talked about divisions 1 through 48. And so each of these divisions really break down into what are called work groups, right? And so Division 1 is general requirements, which we talked about. Division 2 are existing conditions. So anytime you've got an existing building, you will likely include some specification sections from Division 2. If it's not an existing building, you won't. Division 3 is concrete. 4 is masonry. 5 is metals. But that's not everything that's made from metal. It's usually metals that relate to the building structure. So structural steel, joists, decks, cold form metal framing, those sorts of things. It does not include stuff like sheet metal flashing, right? Just because that's made of metal doesn't mean that goes in metals. That actually occurs in Division 7 under thermal and moisture protection. Let me back up. Division 6, wood, plastics, and composites. So that's like your wood framing, wood trim, if you have wood trusses, studs, that kind of stuff. Plastics, stuff like FRP or polycarbonate type stuff. Division 7, thermal and moisture protection. So Division 7 is one of the bigger sections that has materials in it because if you think about it, it's usually dealing with materials that are the exterior envelope. All right. So these are things that protect the building thermally and from moisture. So that includes stuff like roofing, different wall assemblies, EIFS, metal wall panels, air barriers, those sorts of things. And then to go along with that, in Division 8 are openings. So anything that's an opening in your exterior walls. So things, or interior walls as well. So that'll be things like windows, doors, garage doors, anything, storefront, curtain wall, all those sorts of things. Division 9 is finishes. And so that is things, anything that finishes it out. So paint, carpet, ceiling tile, think of it as anything that's applied to the building structure. Gypsum board, all those sorts of things. Division 10 is specialties. So this is things like your grab bars, your toilet and bath accessories, flag poles, all those sorts of things. Division 11 is equipment. So think, if you have a project with residential appliances or kitchen appliances or trash compactors or those sorts of things. Division 12 is furnishings, so that's furniture. Division 13 is any special construction. So that's things like pools and spas, pre-engineered metal buildings, anything that's a specialty. There's not that many sections under Division 13. And Division 14 is conveying equipment. And so those are things that are either conveying people or things. Elevators, escalators, dumbwaiters, moving walkways, those sorts of things. So those are the main sections as an architect that you'll be specifying. Now, division 21 through 28 is really divisions that your mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineer will be responsible for. Fire suppression, plumbing, HVAC, automation, electrical, communications, and safety and security. Division 31 through 35 is pretty much civil engineering. So earthwork, exterior improvements. There are a couple Division 32 specs that you will write. Things like, unit pavers, paving on, little brick pavers or, some sort of pavers. Exterior sidewalks, exterior concrete joint sealants, those sorts of things. And then 40 through 48 are really industrial related civil engineering type things. These are things that your project management expert architect may write some specifications on, but really it's all about, think about these sections being for large industrial plants, power plants, things like that, where there's some serious mechanical or process-oriented systems. So, like we talked about, specifications being in 3 parts. So part 1 is basically all the general information on it. So you go through, there's a summary of what it is, any references and definitions, description of the system, what submittals you're going to require from the contractor on that section, any quality assurance requirements you've got, if you've got any mock-ups or pre-installation meetings or anything like that. Part 2 really focuses on manufacturers, existing products, materials, components, finishes, any inspections or anything that are required on it, those sorts of things. And then part 3 is the execution part, right? So that's where you talk about, who can install it, what site conditions have to be there in order for them to install that product, what they have to do to prepare surfaces, how it's erected, installed, or applied to something. If there's any special techniques or sequence of operation of the construction that they need to know, how they can repair and restore it, in case it gets damaged during installation, how do you repair or restore that material? Field quality control tests. So sometimes you may specify some site testing after something is installed. Typically you'd see that on stuff like curtain walls or roof or something that's part of the building enclosure. Any adjusting or cleaning that needs to happen, for operable things. You may specify some demonstration and training. So like if it's a system like a operable partition or an elevator or something like that, you may require that they have some demonstration and training for the owner on how to do that. And then any protection, that they need to do after it's installed. Do they have to do anything to protect it during the remainder of construction? And then sometimes you'll have some schedules in terms of locating things or how those apply to the construction documents. So some great specification resources. Now, when I say that you're going to write these, what's great is that there is a tool out there that you subscribe to, you pay for, called MasterSpec. And so MasterSpec is a product that's provided by CSI, or the Construction Specifiers Institute. And CSI is comprised of contractors, architects, and building testing agencies, and also building product manufacturers, so the people that actually make those products. And they work together to write these specifications that MasterSpec prepares, and then you edit it, each of those sections, to suit your project. Another great resource are product manufacturers, but know that if you are using a specification prepared by a specific product manufacturer, it's typically written to be proprietary, and they will make it very difficult to have a substitution with the way they write their specs. So something to be cautious of. And usually you use a word editing program. There's also a newer program out there called eSpecs. We've been using that in our office for probably 4 or 5 years, and it's more of a automated database type of thing that pulls in the Word document and makes it a little bit easier to edit. So there are 3 main methods for specifying a product. First is descriptive specifying, which is the exact characteristics, right? Which is saying it's got to be meet these testing requirements. Well, or it's one of these products by these manufacturers, right? And it generally needs to do this function. The second is performance specifying. And so typically what that is you're saying, I really don't care what manufacturer it is, just as long as it meets these test results and provides these performance results. And then the third is proprietary, which says provide this product. It's just this product, no variation, do this. So those are the 3 main methods for specifying. The main takeaway that I want you to get from this particular lecture is the drawing format, in terms of drawings, or the construction document format, and what all compiles: the project manual, the bidding documents, the contract documents, and the construction documents. And then also, you've got your specifications that are doing communicating one set of things, and your drawings that are communicating another set of things, and that those 2 things have to talk to each other. One of the biggest frustrations architects have is when their drawings and their specifications aren't saying the same thing, and that just leaves it up for misinterpretation or ambiguity, or just a series of other problems. And so it's really important that as you're preparing those contract documents, which includes the specifications and drawings, that those 2 things talk to each other with that cute little slide. So what we'll do is hopefully this has worked okay, and everybody has gotten a chance to view this. And then when we meet over Zoom, which I hope also works, we can have an opportunity to ask some questions. Thanks, guys.